What did he say?
They've only just got to Kathy's cross-examination. She's been in that box since 11:30 this morning, so it doesn't look as though we'll be called today.
Oh, so we'll have to come back tomorrow then, eh?
I'm afraid so.
Poor Kathy.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy for her, Mrs. Fowler. Wilmot Brown's barrister's first class.
So, you would say that he was a kind and considerate employer towards his bar staff?
Yes.
Kind, considerate, well-liked?
Yes.
And particularly kind, Mrs. Beale, would you not agree to yourself?
Well, he used to talk to me quite a lot, if that's what you mean.
Well, more than to the other members of staff?
I suppose so.
I see. And did you enjoy these talks?
Well, yeah.
So, he was a good conversationalist, was he?
Yeah.
And a good listener?
Yes.
Mrs. Beale, I understand you're separated from your husband.
Well, not exactly.
We live at separate addresses. I mean, I would say that implied separation.
I wasn't separated at the time of the rape.
No, but the marriage was already in difficulties.
I suppose so.
Well, was it or wasn't it?
It was in difficulties, yeah.
Yeah, so I dare say that during these chats you discussed these difficulties, did you?
Sometimes, yeah.
And since Mr. Wilmot Brown was himself recently divorced, I dare say you discussed his marital problems as well.
Yes.
Yes, Mrs. Beale, I think I'm beginning to get a picture of these little chats. Two unhappy people, both seeking solace in each other's company. Is that how it was?
Slightly.
Slightly?
All right, yes, in a way.
What was your husband's attitude towards you working as a barmaid for Mr. Wilmot Brown?
Your Honour, this line of questioning is hardly relevant.
I am endeavouring to show that the lady did indeed have a close relationship with the defendant, Your Honour, and was prepared to jeopardise her marriage in order to continue working for him.
That's not true.
Silence.
The line of questioning seems entirely relevant to me, Mr. Wickham.
I repeat, what was your husband's attitude towards your job at the Dagmar?
He didn't like it much.
Would it not be more accurate, Mrs. Beale, to say that he hated it? That it made him very angry and jealous? And would it not also be true to say that he suspected you of having an affair with Mr. Wilmot Brown?
Yes.
You had a council flat on a low rent. You had no dependent children. Both you and your husband ran successful market stalls. Doesn't seem to me you needed the Dagmar job for the money.
Well, it was useful.
But not essential.
No.
Well, if the money was not essential and your husband objected so strongly, why on earth did you carry on? Was it because you were attracted to Mr. Wilmot Brown?
No.
But you were aware that he was attracted to you?
He said he was, yeah.
Well, you must have felt extremely flattered,
No.
Mrs. Beale. Oh, come, come. A man who, by your own admission, you find attractive, a well-educated man, your boss, who took a special friendly interest in you?
All right, to start with, I might have been a bit flattered.
Flattered and, I suggest, excited by his attentions, Mrs. Beale. I don't propose to keep you for very much longer. Now, let us turn our attention to the night in question. Knowing that you and my client were the subject of local gossip, knowing full well that he found you attractive, knowing that your husband was away, you voluntarily went upstairs late at night alone with Mr. Wilmot Brown to his flat when there was no one else in the building. Is that correct?
Yes, but...
And once there, you listened to music and drank champagne together.
Look, I know what it sounds like, but that's not how it was.
They are the simple facts, Mrs. Beale. Facts which you yourself have given to this court.
Yes, but I didn't mean it to be like that.
Would you say you were a stupid woman?
I don't think so.
No, neither would I. I'm sure the jury would agree with me that your demeanour in this box has been far from stupid. You run your own successful market stall, don't you?
Yes.
So I would deduce from that that not only are you intelligent, but you are also street-wise.
I don't know.
No, market traders have to be street-wise, Mrs. Beale, otherwise they would not survive. I'm sure you are no exception. Now, it does strike me as extremely odd that you would ever go into any situation without weighing up the pros and cons, without knowing exactly what was going on. In short, I put it to you that when you went upstairs to Mr. Wilmot Brown's flat on the night of July the 7th, 1988, you knew precisely what you were doing.
No! No!
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to go over this again. Now, you said that he pushed or pulled you to the floor, gripping you by the upper arms.
Yes.
And so, presumably, he had one hand on each arm, did he? Like this?
Yes.
And then when you were on the floor, you were struggling to get up?
Yes.
And so, therefore, he had to maintain his grip on your arms, I suppose.
Yes.
And then, according to your evidence to Mr. Wickham, he removed your lower garments.
Yes.
How?
He,
If he was having to hold you down because you were struggling to get up, how did he manage to remove your clothes?
I can't remember exactly. He must have let go with one hand.
Let go with one hand? Mrs. Beale! My client is a small, slightly built man. How on earth could he do that? How could a man of his build, when confronted by a woman like our witness here, a fit, healthy woman in the prime of her life, a woman who by her own admittance was struggling, fighting, kicking, screaming, how on earth could he hold her down with one hand and undress her with the other? I wouldn't like to try it. I put it to you that Mrs. Beale's version of events is a physical impossibility. I submit there was no struggle, that she was not pushed to the ground, but rather that she undressed herself of her own accord as a willing participant. You say you were screaming?
Yes.
How loudly were you screaming?
I don't know.
Well, loudly enough to have been heard downstairs, for example?
Yeah, but I told you lots of times there wasn't
Mrs.
anyone
Beale,
there.
are you aware that later examination of the flat showed that there was a window opened in Mr. Wilmot Brown's sitting room that night?
No.
So presumably the screaming that you have just said was loud enough to have carried downstairs would also have been loud enough to have carried out through the window, would it not, to the street below?
I don't know.
And yet no one heard it. A summer's evening, people strolling home from the fish and chip shop, the wine bar, Chinese restaurant, street quiet, not much traffic. Why, Mrs. Beale, were your screams not heard? Is it because you're lying? Is it because there weren't any?
No! I'm sorry, I don't think I can stand much more of this.
Have you many more questions, Mr. Swale? You do seem to have been cross-examining this witness for a very long time.
I apologise, Your Honour. There are not many questions. Mrs. Beale, can I make absolutely certain that I have understood events correctly?
Yes.
On the night of July the 7th, your husband was away.
Yes.
And first dressing in attractive clothes.
My usual bar clothes,
And
that's
making
all.
yourself up carefully. You went to work for Mr. Wilmot Brown behind the bar of the Dagmar public house.
Yes.
Aware, of course, of the gossip linking your name with my client. You went upstairs to his flat, where you drank first a whiskey, then a bottle of champagne, and listened to music of a romantic nature.
Yes.
And after talking for half an hour or so, you had intercourse.
Against my will.
And there we have it. My client says you consented. You say you did not. You say you screamed loudly, but even though there was a window open, no one heard you. You say you struggled and kicked, and yet my client had no cuts or bruises, nor was his clothing torn or in any way damaged.
Mr. Swale, please confine yourself to asking the witness questions, not speech-making.
I apologise again, Your Honour. Mrs. Beale, I put it to you that your version of the story has no truth in it. That you willingly had intercourse with my client and only later decided to lie about it in order to save your marriage.
No!
One final question, Your Honour. Mrs. Beale, I think you said earlier you had one child.
Yes.
Well, you don't sound very sure. Mrs. Beale...
All right. I had two.
Two?
I had a daughter.
A daughter? I see. And this daughter, was she a child of your marriage to Mr. Beale?
Look, what's the point of this, him beating around the bush when he knows it all already?
Mrs. Beale.
You know she wasn't. I had her when I was 14 and gave her away for adoption. Is that what you want me to say? Or do you want me to tell him about the rape and all? Yes, I was raped before, when I was 14. I can't help it. There's no law that can't happen twice, is there?
Raped before when you were 14. Another rape, Mrs. Beale? Well, well, well. What are we to make of it all?
Is this true?
Silence!
Is it?
Silence in the court!
Well, it doesn't make what he did any less terrible, does it? I mean, that's not the fact that he's a rapist too, does it? I mean, it just doesn't make any difference. He's sitting there...
Did you report this rape, Mrs. Beale?
Please.
No, you didn't, did you? Because the rape then was a lie to get yourself out of trouble, just as it is today. Mrs. Beale, it really does begin to seem that whenever you get into a tight corner, you do not cry wolf, you cry rape. There is no evidence to substantiate the charge, and this witness is entirely unreliable.